the application Ionic. So it might be a review for a lot of you, but if it's new and you're wondering about Ionic, what is it? I'm just gonna talk briefly about how Ionic's different than maybe other mobile technologies. So it's a framework for building what they call hybrid apps, hybrid mobile apps. So versus like native apps, like you might have like a Facebook app on your phone or on your iOS phone. It leverages the web technologies that you're used to using in the browser, so HTML5, CSS, SAS. And then what makes it a hybrid is it integrates with what they call Cordova plugins, which are like plugins that they write and then compile them to access native things on your phone. So like your camera would be a good example, or maybe a social network app, or calendar, anything that's on your phone in a normal app. They write these Cordova plugins that then you can tie into and use them in your hybrid app. And originally, Ionic was written, pretty much used Angular as kind of the default language, and it's still probably the default language, although Stencil and others, they're trying to make it so it's language neutral, but we still focus in this workshop just using Angular. So benefits of Ionic, one of the reasons I've liked Ionic is it allows you to create mobile applications with a single platform. So I do a lot of stuff on my own. I don't have time to write, to learn Objective-C and Android and do multiple apps. So I can use the same code base, and the same code base I would use for maybe a web application too. So leverages the phone browser capabilities, it's an opinionated development framework, so it uses Angular and follows good practices. So if you want to learn Angular, Ionic is a really good platform to use because it shows you the best practices. And the browser technology continues to improve. And in years past, there's been some criticism of hybrid apps, but more and more the browsers are just getting better and better. And so it lowers the cost of mobile development. So when I first started, I used to write Windows apps and Mac apps, and that was always a big expense. And some companies would just not write a Mac app and they just write Windows apps. So it's kind of like the cycle's repeated itself with mobile platforms. So drawbacks, it's like I said, it's not 100% native. So it can run slower than a native application, but native applications can run slow too. So it kind of depends on how you develop it. And then Cordova plugins vary in quality. So some are pretty good, some are buggy and not that good. So that's some of the drawbacks. Good candidates for Ionic apps. If you're in a startup and you want to write your first minimum viable product, I think Ionic is perfect. So you can get it out there, get it in the hands, get it in all the the Google Store and Apple Store. It's great if you're a solopreneur like myself. So I'm a software consultant. I do a lot of my own stuff. It's perfect for me because I get to leverage Angular, and then I can write my own apps and have fun with those, and not have to worry about learning different platforms. The other thing, I work in a lot of enterprise space. I find Ionic is perfect for if there's an enterprise application or a big ERP type of application and they want to modernize it and add a mobile platform to it. Ionic would be perfect because you don't need all the features of your whole accounting package in a mobile app. But there's probably some features you'd like to leverage, and Ionic would make it easy to do that and very cost effective for a business. The Ionic development platform it's an opinionated platform in Ionic. It follows, or in Angular, uses a lot of the same Angular tools. So Angular has a command line interface. Ionic also has a command line interface that work almost exactly the same. Leverages Angular, and they're moving towards more web components with their own language called Stencil, which a lot of their components in this version 4 use Stencil. But you don't have to write it in Stencil if you don't want to. Here are some of the main parts that we'll go over in this workshop. Pages are a key component, essentially a page on in your mobile app. Components are really objects, and they come from Angular. So, and then services are like web services that you might call. So you separate your app into like pages and components, and then when you want to call a data service, you'll call a service. Yeah.
Just a question on pages. Are pages really different than components? Because I just saw the you know.
Well, a page is a component.
It is, right? Okay. But they
Yeah.
call them pages when it's like basically HTML. There's no really business logic or anything.
Yeah, I think if you don't need the page, it just generates a component. I put them in here because the ones that have the CLI are actually generators. So if you use the CLI, it'll generate a component or a page. But you're right, a page essentially is a component.
Yeah, there's just a few other things they do when it's a page, like make it accessible for navigation, and yeah.
You mean through the router or?
Yeah.
But it's the same with the component, right?
Or is it more 508 compliance accessibility? Or?
I don't know if it gets to that level.
Yeah, it's just it just has to do with the structure of the app. There's just a few different,
So
more
there
lines.
are differences, or
Just like
It's like a specialized component because it's its own
yeah,
component. And so it
yeah.
has
There's
its
just a
own
few little
labels.
things you add to a component, make it a page, and they do that for you. If you say generate page,
okay.
they do those page things.
Because if you look at when we'll look at a page, it says it's a component. So it's really more of the CLI generate a few things, adding the routes to it, and so they have it as a specific thing to generate. And for an app, that's a particular thing you want to put in there. Directives are again things to like change in the DOM. They come from Angular too. And then some of these other things, anything in Angular you can essentially use. So it uses templates, so pages use templates, uses routes. One of the big changes in V4 is it's adopted, used to have its own routing, it's adopted Angular routing. And then pipes is an Angular mechanism for modifying data in your page. So as you were saying, here's an example of a page component, but you can see it's a component, right? And then it has the templates and everything built into it. So that might be part of it, is it generates these things for you. And then like here's the HTML that it would generate. You put this in there and then you would tie into that component. Okay, so as I mentioned, it creates its own directory structure when you create that project. So you have an app, your interfaces will be in here, your pages will be in here. Providers are the same thing as services. I'm not sure why they call them different, but in Angular we've been calling them provider. I mean in Ionic we've been calling them providers. Angular call them services. So, but they're essentially the same thing. And then this is the same. So this is the conference app that we'll do later in the workshop. And so it's just showing all the different files that when you did that start, it creates most of these files. And when we create these first few projects, you'll see that.
Which version? I mean, I noticed. I just saw my structure, and it's a little different than that. Ionic 6, I guess it is,
Or Ionic 4.
I mean, it says 5, I think, in the package. If you look at Ionic Core, it says 5 actually. Ionic Angular 4.
Ionic Native. Ionic Native are plugins.
Oh, those are the plugins.
Yeah.
So this is the version.
Yeah, there it is.
Or
Ionic
or
/
data.
Angular. Yeah.